it's an expansion. The library is outside of a physical space, in the sense that we've got tentacles, so to speak, in different parts of the scholarly enterprise.
Today on Law Next, the changing face of law librarians. We'll speak with Femi Cadmus, president of the American Association of Law Libraries, about what it means to be a law librarian in 2019 and beyond. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to Law Next, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. We'll get to today's interview in just a moment, but first, let's hear from the sponsors who generously support Law Next. And now, on to this week's interview. Femi Cadmus, welcome to Law Next.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for having me today.
So I introduced you as president of the American Association of Law Libraries, but of course you also have a day job as director of the Law Library at Duke Law School and associate dean of information services and technology there. But I think it's fair to say that you had a somewhat unusual route to get where you are. You were born in New York and raised in Nigeria and went to law school in Nigeria. So how did you get from law school in Nigeria to working at a law school in North Carolina?
Okay. Well, that's a very interesting question. So you're right. I was born in New York City, Nigerian parents, and my father returned to Nigeria to take on a faculty appointment. Raised in Nigeria, did the first degree, which is your law degree is your first degree in Commonwealth countries, got my LL.B. And then I actually went to England and I did an LL.M. in England. And as a U.S. citizen, I decided to, return to the States. And like most lawyers, I shouldn't say most lawyers, I think that's generalizing too much, but like many lawyers who love the research component, who love the public interest component of law, but don't really want to practice law. I found myself in that situation when I go back to the States. And the very first job I found, I wasn't licensed to practice then. I'm currently licensed in the state of New York, but I was not licensed to practice. The first position I found was in a law school library at the University of Oklahoma. I started off as a research assistant. And I probably would never have applied to a library. I didn't actually spend time in the library as a law student. I chose to read in the dorm. I was never in the library, but this was just serendipity. And I found myself in this law school library, working as a research assistant, working with U.S. law. And of course, I had a common law background, but I didn't have much experience with U.S. law, but it was a great way for me to get myself saturated and exposed to it, helping students and faculty and pro se patrons. So that's how I really got into law librarianship. A lot of serendipity, a lot of prayer, because I didn't know what I was doing. But that's how I got started.
So you didn't start out with the intent of becoming a law librarian.
No, I think if anyone had said, this is the trajectory to becoming a law librarian, I would have gone the opposite direction because like many people, law librarians are caricatured. Lots of stereotypes and you think it's the dullest, most boring thing that you could ever do on the planet. So I'm glad that I stumbled into librarianship just as many of my colleagues have stumbled into the profession and discovered that it's really very dynamic, changing constantly and infused with technology. More so now, we're talking almost 30 years ago, pre the internet. So it was it was a different era, the era of the CAD catalog. PCs looked really very different. Had any exposure at all to Lexis and Westlaw and all the opportunities that we have to do research in the 21st century. We're talking 20th century librarianship.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a law librarian, but I went to law school a long time ago, and so I remember those days of what it was like to research before there was such a thing as Westlaw and Lexis.
Lexis, yes.
Yeah. But you did go on and get a master's degree in library science.
So I did. I started to enjoy this immensely. I thought, oh my goodness, this is what I want to do. There is this very rewarding human element to being an information professional, where you're helping people who sometimes are in crisis, and it could be a law student who's in crisis sometimes, or it could just be a pro se patron who has a real life issue and you're guiding them through. I just knew it at that point that I wanted to be a law librarian. So I went to library school. I did it part time while I worked, and the rest is history.
And just give us a summary of your career. I don't you don't have to go through a
Okay,
long
sure,
recitation, but
sure.
before you got to Duke, you've worked at a number of other academic law school libraries.
Yes.
So where have you been?
So I started off at the University of Oklahoma, where I was a research assistant, went to library school, and my first post M.L.I.S, that's the Master's in Library and Information Science position, was at George Mason, now Scalia Law School in Arlington, Virginia. And I really got my feet wet in the profession there. And I moved from George Mason, Scalia Law, to Yale Law School, where I got my administrative chops. I was the Associate Law Librarian for Administration. And after I left Yale, I went to Cornell. And I spent 7 years, almost 8 years at Cornell before coming to Duke, where I took on an appointment as research professor, associate dean, and director of the law library, and actually having oversight over information technology and academic technologies. So I've expanded outside of the library, and my scope has really grown, and I'm stretching as having oversight over IT and academic technologies here at Duke Law.
It's interesting that you say that, though, because in some ways, the survey that I want to talk about
Mhm,
today
mhm,
indicates that that's true, not
mhm.
just for you, but more generally. We'll get to this. I
Mhm.
want to ask a couple of other questions first,
Sure.
well, let me just mention right here that this year the American Association of Law Libraries commissioned for the first time the State of the Professions
Mhm.
report,
That's correct.
which was a in-depth, data-heavy, data-driven study of what the profession of law librarianship looks like in 2019. And one of the conclusions that came to is really that there is a much heavier technology component for librarians across the board.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's very true. And I'm so glad that I straddle this different eras for librarianship, and I've seen a transformation. I'm glad that I started, when we were embedded in paper, when we used card catalogs, when everything was manual. And slowly we started to see technology being infused into the profession and a lot of automation. And it's just been this trajectory of more and more increasing technology, to the point where you will see in the State of the Profession survey that many librarians, law librarians, and information professionals, and we're called by different names. We don't all go by the title law librarian, but I will use law librarians and legal information professionals. Many of us are leading initiatives in our work environments, leading management of research platforms, being right in the center of artificial intelligence initiatives in firms managing knowledge management systems. So there's a lot of technology that has been infused and embedded and integrated into our profession. And what we're seeing is that this is going to continue. It's not going to abate, it's actually going to continue. For that reason, many of our colleagues in the profession are seeking new skills. Data analytics is big in data analysis and visualization, in machine learning, artificial intelligence. And that's that's where the focus is turning. You'll see that also as the bedrock of our annual meeting. If you look in our annual meeting program and if you look at the offerings that we have, it really gives a strong indication as to where the profession's going, where it is right now, and where it's heading for the future. So it's just been amazing for me personally just to see the transformation. Very exciting to see it. And the great thing about librarians is that personality wise, we're very resilient, we're very adaptable, and it's exciting to see the newcomers and people who've been in the past, who understand what it's looked like, embrace the new technologies and embrace the new way of thinking and leading projects in this arena. So it's very exciting at times to
Yeah.
be a
For,
law librarian.
for you personally,
Mhm.
as far as I could tell, you started working as a law librarian sometime in the early to mid '90s, if I have that right. I mean, has has that been the most significant change that you've seen, the role of technology in what you do, or have there been other kind of significant changes over the course of your career as well?
So I started in 1990, so it will be 30 years, and that sounds scary when I think about it, that I have been a law librarian. It's been that long. And I think technology predominantly has been the driving force for change. There have been other influences, similar to what's happening in the legal industry generally, where the economy, the downturn, loss of funding, have posed opportunities for us to streamline, to be innovative, to think creatively, to respond. So I'll say that technology, for one, has driven a lot of change, but reduced budgets, and you'll see that in the State of the Profession survey. I don't think anybody has escaped reduced budgets. So just to give context to our listeners, the American Association of Law Libraries is an association that attracts law librarians and information professionals from three major segments, from academic law libraries, from private firm law libraries, and from the government. And the State of the Profession survey covered these three major segments. And we could see across the board that many of us have suffered a decline in revenue. It's been felt so much in law school libraries. I would say that's where it's actually been pretty significant, that law school libraries have seen a loss of funding. But what I've seen also is a response to that change in a very positive way, a streamlining of processes. And thankfully, because we're seeing more technology in law libraries, we can actually focus on the high level strategic things and allow automation and technology to take care of the things that are more task based and that consumed a lot of time. We're seeing librarians and information professionals being the bedrock of and the foundation of their institutions. So in law school libraries, law librarians are teaching. They're allying with other departments in the law schools, career services, admissions. They're providing assistance in their organizations, and it's no different in government and also in the private firm sector. So I don't know
Yeah,
if that answers a little bit of what
yeah,
has
yeah.
made
Well,
the change
absolutely.
happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, you alluded to this earlier, but I even wonder, and I've actually heard this talked about it at AALL meetings I've been to in the past,
Hmm.
whether the title law librarian is even really descriptive of what the
Yeah.
job is these
Oh,
days. I mean,
yes. Oh, yes.
even the title itself, I think
I
there's
know
discussion about what it should be,
what it should be. I don't know if
whether
you
it should
were,
be any one thing. Yeah.
yes, I don't know if you were part of that discussion. So we had it, I want to say it's 3 years or maybe it's longer. We did have a name change exercise, but we still retained the name American Association of Law Libraries. And the name change exercise was prompted due to the shifts that we're seeing, that law librarians are not always going by that name, and especially in the in firms in the private sector where they've taken names that reflect more of what they do. So if they're providing support in data analysis and knowledge management, then they're knowledge management analysts. If they're helping with marketing and competitive intelligence, they're competitive intelligence analysts. Sometimes they're just research and information analysts, and they're taking on titles that we never had as librarians. I will say that we librarians still treasure that title. You'll see it more embraced in the academic law library context, where there's a lot of legacy and there's a lot of history. And so yes, it's just a broad spectrum of names. You will be talking to a librarian sometimes that not know that this person's a librarian because they have a different title that's more reflective of what they do day to day. But we're embracing everyone in the association. We have a wide spectrum of members. We have members who have the background as librarians, and we have members who are publishers, who are vendors, who are legal information activists and advocates who are in the access to justice and rule of law arena. So we just have we have technologists in our midst too. So we have a broad spectrum of members. And so, yes, we tend to say AALL or AALL, just so that people don't get confused by the name of the association, because we have people who are not in law libraries who belong to our association, and we are enjoying this synergy. There's this very positive combustion and energy that we feel in the association and in our meetings. And I know you've been to our meetings. It's really very dynamic, very, very energetic. And what we want to do is dismantle the stereotype that people have in their minds about what libraries what services libraries provide and what law librarians do, because it goes beyond the expectations of most people today.
Yeah, well, and for me, as somebody who tends to have a particular interest in legal technology, I've actually written about this in the past, that I at one point described your annual meeting as kind of the new technology conference. There are any number of conferences out there devoted to legal technology that bill themselves as such, but
yes,
the going to AALL convention
yes,
is like going to a legal technology conference. And
it is.
and the fascinating thing to me, and your survey makes this point. One of the big takeaways from the survey that you conducted is that AALL members are technology experts, and that's part of the job these days.
That is a requirement. It is part of the job. It is a job, honestly, that has changed significantly in the past couple of decades. And it's technology has been embraced by our members, and I don't think any industry actually in this day and age can survive without embracing technology. But it's not just been embraced. Our members are leading the charge and leading initiatives in their work environment. So it's just incredible, very exciting to see. I know that folks who recently have become librarians or who just joined the association cannot really see that transformation, but for me personally, seeing the transformation just makes me smile and makes me just get all excited. And I can't even begin to imagine what it's going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years, just seeing the change that has occurred in the past few decades.
We'll get back to my interview in just a moment, but first, let's take a break to hear from the sponsors who generously support Law Next. And now, let's continue this week's interview. One of the interesting findings of this survey, it was discussed, this may be broader than this, but it was in the government librarian section of the survey. The respondents were asked how transitioning from print to electronic resources has impacted their positions. And the impact they most frequently cited was that it had resulted in expanded duties for them. That seemed almost counterintuitive to me, in the sense that you tend to think that technology and digitization is going to streamline the work we do.
Hmm.
Do you have any sense of how that is, how it is that transition has expanded librarian duties?
So, yeah, you will see that people will talk about an expansion of duties, and they will also talk about how technology and electronic resources have streamlined processes. You will see them also talking about how there's a reduction in the number of support staff. So the people who did the lower level task-oriented functions have been reduced. So what's happening is staff is being reduced, processes have been streamlined, but there's an expansion because dealing with data, people feel like data just works. You know, data,
Yeah.
dealing with extensive data is time consuming, requires a lot of monitoring. It's just like when we talk about artificial intelligence and um, people think, okay, well, machines are going to do everything. And that means life is going to become tremendously easy and we can just, sit back and enjoy life. But what it means is that the work is just higher level work is what we're seeing. So there is an expansion in that sense. I will not say, I would not quantify it, but I'll say in sophistication, because again, we're streamlining, we're reducing the number of support professional staff, professional support staff that we have in organizations, but the higher level strategic work, which requires managing data, which requires collaborating and partnering with other departments in the organization, have expanded our duties. That's personally what I see happening in my shop here at Duke Law Library, where we're doing so much more and we're so much more integrated and embedded in the scholarly enterprise. So higher level work, more strategic work, that's what the expansion means. It is expanding to broader work. It doesn't mean that the work's going to shrink because of technology. It just means that the work's going to be more efficient. It's going to be more streamlined. But strategically, the higher level work is going to expand. And that I think describes probably what you're seeing, especially in the government sector.
Yeah. What about in the sector that you work in the academic law libraries? Was there any particular takeaway or finding in this survey that surprised you or stood out to you about that area?
I think what surprised me was how much of a hit budgets had taken in academic law libraries and also in government libraries, but more so in academic law libraries. I was surprised that it was so significant. And the reason that it surprised me was that law librarians and information professionals have gone on without missing a bit, without skipping a bit. They've just, taken on even added responsibilities in the organization. So take, for example, in my institution and as well as other academic law libraries, um, with experiential learning credits increasing per ABA standards and requirements, we've seen librarians move into that space and providing more experiential learning opportunities in for credit courses taught in law schools. In my prior institution, there is a legal research clinic which was started when I was there, and this is a full-blown clinic that provides research skills to students so that when they go out there into the real world, they hit the ground running. They have real clients that they were advising, and we're just seeing a lot more of that, a lot more embedding in the scholarly enterprise, in teaching, in working again, and I think I mentioned this earlier, with other parts of the law school, with clinical programs, with career services, with the dean's office. So it's an expansion. The library is outside of a physical space, in the sense that we've got tentacles, so to speak, in different parts of the scholarly enterprise. And the library is no longer siloed. It used to be that you came to the library for help. But the
It
library
was
is
a
in all
place.
these different kinds of spaces. Yes, and it's still a place. I tell people it's amazing. So, you come to Duke, it's summer, so it's a bit quiet. But you come to the library, and it's just this hub of activity. Same thing with my prior institutions, especially those that I have the Gothic, very um, very beautiful reading rooms, and you talk to the students and they'll say, hey, it's inspirational space. I want to be in a space that I'm inspired. So they want to be in a space where they can collaborate. They want to be in a space where they can study. They want to be in a space where they can eat. So you're seeing cafes. They just, it's their, we've heard about this third place. It's,
Yeah,
they don't even want to go home. They want 24/7
sure.
access, and that's increasingly the case in many law schools where there's 24/7 access to
Yeah.
the law library because it's still a relevant place. But we've gone beyond that too, realizing that not all our users and stakeholders will come into our space. And so we're going out there to meet them and meeting them at the point of their needs.
And certainly not so much the case in law firms in the private sector. I mean, a lot of law firms have virtually gotten rid of their law libraries.
Well, let's put it this way. A lot of law firms have increasingly gotten rid of their print collections.
Yeah, but I mean,
And
gotten rid of the
there's
spaces that were their libraries effectively. I mean,
some of
you
them
know,
have,
yeah,
I know some have, I was reading, was it a few years ago, where it's now the lounge library. So it's a combination of a lounge space and a library space. So you go into this space and it's comfortable. You've got the Genius bar, the comfortable chairs, and you're wondering where are the books. But they've converted to electronic resources, digital resources, which they're using online. And we're seeing that happen in law school libraries too, where space has become very premium, and that's the honest
yeah,
truth. That space is premium. Um, so there are lots of books that have been withdrawn from libraries, even in academic law libraries, to make use for dynamic space. And the State of the Profession survey actually is reflective of this type of transformation of libraries. But yes, you're very correct about law firm libraries. If you're going to be in New York City, DC, or Chicago, you're not going to pay per square foot for reporters that you can pull online. That doesn't make any sense at all. But we're still in a time where we have different users. We have the born digital users. We have faculty and partners who have grown up with books who still want the books. So we're still balancing different needs, and we will still see books in many libraries for some time to come. They're decreasing in number, but they're still there. And I actually like to walk through the library and see how students are studying. And often they'll have books and their
yeah,
laptops.
yeah,
So we're still there. We're still
yeah.
with books for the foreseeable future.
Good. That's good. So, what are the skills that it takes to be successful as a librarian now? What are the competencies you have to be successful as a librarian?
So there are the soft skills, which I'll talk about, and there are the technical skills, which you need to have. And what I did was I looked at the State of the Profession survey. So I wasn't making this up. See what actually we've been able to find out by surveying our members. And if you look at the survey, which you have, thank you very much. I know you've
I
read
have.
the
Yes,
survey and you've
I have.
reported out on it, and we thank you for that. But if you look at the part of the survey that talks about looking ahead, Skills 2021, no surprise that data analysis is one of the big things that people are looking at, second to artificial intelligence and machine learning. But data analysis, data visualization continue to be big, and data will continue to be big in the legal industry. It is a market right now, and it is a skill and expertise that our members want to acquire if they don't have it, or they want to hone if they do. So technical skills are paramount, and we know that skills will continue to evolve. So right now, again, as I see from the State of the Profession survey, a lot of data analysis, data visualization. In law schools, empirical research has become big for faculty members, so that we are seeing we're now recruiting. My first hire here at Duke was the head of our empirical research and data support services programs, which goes to tell you how important it is. If that was my first hire, I've been here about 7 months now, and that's the first person I hired.
Yeah.
Um, and so the soft skills are there because we're still interacting with people daily.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we do need people who are personable, people who are flexible, adaptable, who are service oriented. So I continue to emphasize that librarianship is a service oriented industry. We're providing a service, and we need people who have that frame of mind entering into the profession.
As we see these technologies further develop, you talk about AI and machine learning and data visualization and even blockchain applications.
Blockchain is one too that was
Yeah,
mentioned.
yeah.
Yes.
So as you see these continuing to develop and evolve, how do you think that plays into the future of the law library?
I think I, I think for me it's excellent if anyone in any profession can lead initiatives in this context, it would be information professionals because that's the way we're trained. We're trained to work with information, we're trained to work with data, we're trained to manage data, to organize data, to make data discoverable, and to preserve data. We're trained to ensure that data is stable and can be authenticated. Um, we're trained to ensure that data is secure. So we have the base training um, in the time that we're in, and that is the future for us. This is our bread and butter. I think we fight stereotypes or we resist stereotypes because people normally, I mean, if you've grown up in a certain age, you're thinking the librarian always deals with books. But as you've seen, increasingly, um, most law libraries have morphed into the digital and electronic resources. So we're in that space and we do it very well because that's how our training is structured. That's the framework that we understand, and that's where we excel.
And what does that say about librarianship as a career? I mean, what advice for if somebody were to come to you now asking, whether librarianship is a career to pursue and how to go about pursuing it? What kind of advice would you give them?
So that's a great question. So my son is working in a library right now, and I didn't know his background is in graphic design, and we talked, and I encouraged him to think about librarianship as a career, and he started working in libraries, loves it, and will be going to library school. I mentioned this to um, an attorney, and the attorney said to me, "But why would you encourage your son to go into librarianship? It's a dying field."
Right.
And that was a moment where I could really inject myself into that conversation and
Yeah.
steer it in the correct direction. I said, "No, it's not. It's not a dying field. It's a field that is so much needed today because of the things I've said earlier, Bob, in terms of the way that we understand information, we understand the framework, and we manage information, and we're leading initiatives in the information arena." I'd encourage anyone who wants to be a librarian to do it. We're actually getting to a point. I was talking to, we had a librarians meeting yesterday, and we were talking about recruitment. It is becoming increasingly difficult to find people in the field because it seems to be the world's best kept secret where people think it's a certain way, the way they remembered it or the way they've grown up. They have a stereotype in their mind and they don't understand the spaces that we're in. So there's a dearth. We have all these positions open and we don't usually get very big pools because people are not going to library and information science school as much as we'd like them to do, and we're working on that at AALL, where we have a special committee to look into recruitment into the profession. But I think that there's so many opportunities for someone who wants diversity of work. And that's what I've enjoyed most about being a librarian in my context in a law school, where I hold a faculty appointment as a research professor and I teach. And then I come into my space in the library and I administer the library and information technology and academic technologies. And that's another hat that I'm wearing. Um, there's just so much diversity of work, so much excitement. And because technology is transforming the way that we work, there's never a dull moment. Things are just shifting constantly. So somebody who likes that kind of pace, it is unbelievable to think that that kind of space exists in libraries, but it does. You could come in and it looks all quiet, but there's so much going on under the surface. So I'd encourage anyone who's thinking about librarianship as a career. It could be the first one or it could be the second. Many of us, where I was a lawyer before I became a librarian, I practiced law briefly, and I've seen that with many of my colleagues. It's a great second career or a third career or fourth career. So Bob, if you're thinking about it, welcome. We'll have you in the field too.
Well, I'll tell you, my wife went the other way. My wife has a master's degree in library science and then went to law school later and practiced law and didn't go back into library science. So
Oh,
she
she
went the
did
other
not?
way
Oh,
through it. So,
wow.
but she was a
I'm gonna talk.
librarian we'll have to talk.
Oh, is she still in
Uh,
practice though?
she is still in practice, yeah. Uh, One of the areas I wanted to ask you about is something I don't think that the survey covered at all, and I was curious about it,
Mm-hmm.
is the question of diversity in the profession, demographics in terms of how
Mm.
diverse is the profession. Do you know anything about that? Do you have any numbers on that? Do you have any sense of
You know,
what the state of that is within the librarian profession?
anecdotally, just by going into a space, like, just going into our conference and looking around, we look very homogenous. Heavily gender-based in terms of sex. So there are many
Yeah,
women,
yeah,
just like in nursing, who go into the profession. We have men too.
yeah,
In terms of ethnic diversity, we're definitely way behind in terms of attracting people from different backgrounds into the profession. And I think partly that's due to the fact that if you're a lawyer um, and you're from an underrepresented background, a minority background, you don't see becoming a librarian as a mark of being successful. I mean, we're seeing that. So there's a challenge there in terms of the image and in terms of the possibilities. And, there's the joke that I never tell about you don't get rich being a librarian. Um, and so there are things that we wrestle with in the association. We do have initiatives. So we have this very comprehensive program, the Judge Straight Diversity Fellowship, which provides scholarships to underrepresented groups and also fellowships. Very recently, in the past year, we introduced a fellowship program where underrepresented librarians from underrepresented groups can become fellows in libraries across the United States, and it's fully funded to give them skills in the profession. But I think that that's something that we need more data on. We really don't have a lot of data. I've noticed that in terms of diversity in the profession. But like I said, anecdotally, I look around the room in our gatherings and I can tell that we
yeah,
have more work to do.
yeah. This survey is something you're going to continue to do in years to come?
We plan to. So this was like a pilot, and I have to give a shout out to the brain behind the survey, Megan Mall. Megan Mall is a librarian who works at our headquarters in Chicago. And this was really her concept. And we said, hey, let's do it. Let's develop this. She worked with a special committee and let's pilot it. Let's see how it's received. And it's been received very well. So I think I can safely say that we are going to do this again for sure. And I like the question the comment you raised about not track. We didn't track diversity. I think that that's something that we will track the next time for sure.
Well, Femi, Cadmus, we're just about out of time. Is there anything else? Give you the last word. If there's anything else you wanted to mention or talk about before we wrap up.
So I just wanted to mention that we have an annual meeting coming up in Washington, D.C. with a theme capitalizing on our strengths. And it's going to be a fantastic meeting. It's between July 13 and 16 in DC. We're expecting up to 1,500 attendees. That's what we're hoping for, and we're getting close to that as we approach July. We're going to have dynamic educational programs focusing on technology and our core values, access to justice, rule of law, access to legal information. We're going to have lots of exhibitors, new exhibitors, exhibitors who are established in the industry, about 150 exhibit booths. It's just a very highly charged, when I say highly charged in a very positive way, dynamic environment and a great place to network. So I'm hoping to see people in DC joining me in DC, and I hope to see you, Bob, in DC. I hope you're going to be there.
I will be there. I've already
Oh,
registered, and
wow.
I'm actually moderating a program. I'm
Wonderful. What are you
part of
wonder?
a I'm part of a there's like a full day program or half day program on analytics in law, and
Wow.
moderating one of a series of panels that are part of that program. So
That's right.
looking
I do.
forward to it.
uh,
Yeah,
That's right. I do remember seeing you on the mobile app. So you've got your photo up there and all that. Yeah, that's great. So
yeah,
looking forward to seeing you too.
I'm looking forward to it. Well, thanks a lot, Femi Cadmus, for taking the time to sit down with us today. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you.
It's been a pleasure, Bob. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for having me on your podcast.
And let me give another thanks to the sponsor who helps keep this show running. M.I.Case, with thousands of customers, is a trusted practice management solution helping lawyers across the country run organized, efficient, and successful law firms. Check them out for free at mycase.com. And a big thanks to Ben Ambrogi for producing and editing this show. That's it for this week. This is Bob Ambrogi. Thanks for listening.